Kethvaran had spent his entire life studying maps. As a Scythian, this was expected of him. His species had 6 eyes that could see in 17 different light spectrums, and they possessed perfect memory. Every Scythian remembered everything they had ever seen, heard, or touched. This made them excellent record keepers. This made them perfect cartographers. For 40 years, Kethvaran had worked in the Great Archive on Station Varanthos. The station floated at the center of conquered space, a massive structure where scholars from 100 different species came to study. The archive contained every map ever made. Star charts dating back 12,000 years filled its databases. Trade routes, military boundaries, exploration records, everything was here. Kethvaran loved his work. He loved tracing the paths of ancient explorers. He loved seeing how the known galaxy had grown over the centuries, spreading outward like light from a dying star. But there was one thing he did not love. There was one thing that kept him awake at night. All 6 eyes staring at the ceiling of his small quarters, the map stopped, not at the edge of the galaxy, not at some natural boundary where stars grew thin and space grew empty. The map stopped at a region marked only as Terran Boundary Zone. Beyond that line, there was nothing. No star charts, no planetary surveys, no trade routes, no exploration records. Just empty space in the databases where information should have been. Kethvaran had first noticed this as a young student. He had asked his teacher about it. The teacher, an old Scythian with clouded eyes, had grown very still. "We do not map that region," the teacher had said. "Why not?" young Kethvaran had asked. "Because we do not go there." But why? The teacher had not answered. He had simply walked away, and he never spoke to Kethvaran about maps again. Now, 40 years later, Kethvaran sat alone in the archive's deepest level. The lights were dim. Most scholars had gone to sleep. But Kethvaran was searching. He had been searching for weeks, using access codes he was not supposed to have, looking through files that were supposed to be locked. He found references. Small things. A report from 8,000 years ago mentioned a Terran incident. A military record from 6,000 years ago referenced losses in the human sector. A scientific paper from 4,000 years ago discussed something called consciousness anomalies near Sol system. But every time he tried to access the full records, his screen went dark. Access denied. File not found. Record deleted. Someone had erased the history of human space. Someone had done it very carefully, over thousands of years, removing every trace of what had happened there. Kethvaran leaned back in his chair. His chitin clicked softly as he thought. The humans were still out there. Everyone knew this. They had an ambassador who lived on a station at the edge of conquered space. They traded sometimes, though rarely. They were considered a minor species, unimportant, barely worth mentioning. But if they were so unimportant, why was their entire region of space erased from the maps? Why did no one talk about them? Why, in 12,000 years of conquered history, had no explorer ever charted what lay beyond the Terran boundary? The door to the archive chamber slid open. Kethvaran turned quickly, minimizing his search windows. An old Moravian stood in the doorway. Director Thassan. She was 400 years old, with 7 hearts beating in her massive chest and skin the color of ancient stone. She had been Kethvaran's supervisor for 20 years. "You are searching again," she said. It was not a question. Kethvaran did not bother to lie. Moravians could sense deception in the chemical changes of other species' bodies. Yes. Thesson walked slowly into the room. Her steps were heavy. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "I was like you once," she said. "Young, curious. I asked the same questions. What answers did you find? Answers that taught me to stop asking." Thesson sat down across from him. Her enormous eyes, each one the size of Kethvaran's head, studied him carefully. "There are things in this galaxy that are not meant to be known. The Terran boundary exists for a reason. The silence exists for a reason. You must learn to accept this. I cannot accept ignorance. Then you will suffer for your knowledge." Thessan reached out and touched his foreleg gently. "I have watched you grow from a student into a scholar. You have a brilliant mind. Do not waste it on questions that have destroyed better minds than yours." "What happened?" Kethvaran asked. "What did the humans do?" Thessan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "They did nothing. That was the problem. We sent fleets to their world, long ago. When they were young and weak. We sent armies and warships. We sent the greatest military force the Concord had ever assembled. She paused. None of them came back. Not one ship. Not one soldier. And the humans never fired a single weapon. Keth Varan felt cold, spread through his body. How is that possible? I do not know. No one knows. The humans have never explained, and we have never dared to ask again. Thessan stood slowly. Forget this search, young one. Forget human space. Everyone else has. There is a reason for our forgetting, even if we no longer remember what it is. She left him alone in the dark archive. Keth Varan sat motionless for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned back to his screen. He would not forget. He could not forget. His perfect Scythian memory would not allow it, and neither would his curiosity. He searched for 3 more hours before he found it. A corrupted file, buried in a backup system that had not been cleaned in millennia. A distress signal from a Concord fleet, recorded 3,000 years ago. Just before all contact was lost, he played the recording. Static filled his ears. Then a voice, an admiral, by the designation codes speaking in a language so old that Keth Varan's translator struggled with it. They were waiting for us. The admiral's voice was shaking. Keth Varan had never heard such fear in a military officer's voice. Gods of the void, they knew we were coming before we did. They knew. They knew. The recording dissolved into screaming. Then silence. Keth Varan saved the file to a private device. His hands were trembling. His 6 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. He had spent his whole life mapping the known galaxy. Now he understood that the most important part of any map was not what it showed. It was what it deliberately left empty. The journey to Moravia Prime took 17 days. Keth Varan spent most of that time in his small cabin, listening to the corrupted recording again and again. The Admiral's voice haunted his dreams. The fear in those words was so raw, so absolute, that Keth Varan sometimes woke up shaking. They knew we were coming before we did. What did that mean? How could anyone know the future? The Conquered had many advanced species, many strange technologies, but no one could see what had not yet happened. That was impossible. That was against the laws of physics themselves, and yet an entire fleet had vanished. 10,000 ships, according to the fragments of records Keth Varan had found. The largest military force the Conquered had ever assembled. Gone. Without a single weapon being fired. Moravia Prime was an old world. The Moravians were the oldest species in the Concord, their civilization stretching back nearly 1,000,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched younger species crawl out of their oceans and reach for the stars. And they remembered everything. Not like Scythians remembered. Scythians had perfect personal memory. They remembered everything they personally experienced. But Moravians had something different. They had rememberers. Special individuals who were trained from birth to carry the memories of their entire species. Memories passed down through generations. Memories of events that happened before the current rememberer was even born. The deep warrens were carved into the heart of the planet, far below the surface where light never reached. Keth Varan was guided down by silent Moravian attendants, through tunnels of polished stone that seemed to go on forever. The air grew thick and warm. The silence grew heavy. Finally, they reached the chamber of the eldest. Keth Varan had never seen a being so old. The eldest sat in the center of the vast chamber, surrounded by pools of warm water that kept her ancient body alive. She was massive, easily 50 times Keth Varan's size, and her skin had turned the color of deep space, so dark it seemed to absorb light itself. Her eyes, all 7 of them, glowed with a soft inner fire. Little cartographer. Her voice was like stones grinding together. You come seeking memories that were meant to be forgotten. Keth Varan bowed low. I come seeking truth. Truth. The eldest made a sound that might have been laughter. Truth is dangerous. Truth is heavy. Are you strong enough to carry what I might give you? I do not know, Keth Varan admitted. But I must try. The eldest studied him for a long moment. Then she began to speak, and Keth Varan felt the weight of millennia pressing down on him. When the Concord was young, we were proud. We believed ourselves the masters of the galaxy. We had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had brought dozens of species into our civilization. We were powerful beyond imagination, and we were hungry for more. She paused. her ancient eyes growing distant. Then we found the humans, a small species on a small world, orbiting an unremarkable star. They had barely learned to leave their planet. Their technology was primitive. Their military was laughable. They should have been easy to absorb into the Concord, like so many others before them. What happened? Keth Varan asked. We sent a diplomatic fleet first. 50 ships, carrying offers of alliance and trade. The fleet entered their system, and simply stopped. All communication ceased. The ships drifted dead in space. When we recovered them, months later, the crews were alive but changed. They could not speak. They could not remember their own names. They sat in corners and wept and whispered words in a language that did not exist. Keth Varan felt his legs grow weak. He sat down on the cold stone floor. The Concord Council decided the humans were a threat. A larger fleet was sent. 200 ships, heavily armed. They were ordered to secure the human homeworld and establish control by force. The eldest's voice grew quieter. That fleet never returned. Not one ship. Not one body. Nothing. How is that possible? We did not know. We could not understand. So we did what frightened empires always do. We sent more force. 1,000 ships. Then 5,000. Each fleet vanished. Finally, in desperation, we assembled everything. Every warship in the Concord. 10,000 vessels. The greatest armada in galactic history. The eldest closed her eyes. One ship returned. It drifted out of human space 3 days after the fleet had entered. The crew had aged 60 years in those 3 days. Their hair had turned white. Their bodies had withered. They could not stop screaming, even when they slept. Even when they died, which most of them did within weeks. Keth Varan could barely breathe. What did they say? What happened to them? The recordings of their words were destroyed. I know because I destroyed them myself, 900,000 years ago, when I was young and the Concord Council begged me to help them forget. But I am a rememberer. I cannot truly forget, even when I wish to. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Keth Varan. The survivors said the humans never attacked. No weapons were fired. No ships were destroyed. The fleet simply experienced something. The survivors called it the wait. They said it felt like the entire universe was looking at them with disappointment, like reality itself had decided they should not exist in that space. Time bent, space folded, stars moved in ways that broke the minds of those who saw them. And the humans, they watched. According to the survivors, human ships came to observe, but they did nothing. The humans simply looked at the Concord fleet with sad eyes, like adults watching children make a terrible mistake. One survivor said a human spoke to him directly, somehow, without any communication device. The human said, "We did not want this. We only wanted to be left alone. Why did you make us show you what we are?" Keth Varan sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he asked the question that burned in his mind. What are they? What are humans? I do not know, the eldest admitted. No one knows. They evolved on a world much like many others. They have bodies much like many species. But something in their minds is different, something in the way they think, the way they believe, the way they dream. It is as if the universe itself responds to their thoughts in ways it does not respond to ours. The eldest reached into the water beside her and withdrew a small crystal. If you truly wish to understand, there is one who might tell you. The humans have an ambassador at the edge of Concord space. She has been there for 900 years, never aging, never changing. Her name is Catherine Vance. She is the only human permitted to leave their territory. Keth Varan took the crystal. It contained coordinates. Go to her, the eldest said. Ask your questions. But remember what I have told you. Truth is heavy. And some truths, once learned, can never be set down again. Neutral Station, Cephas 7, was the smallest station Keth Varan had ever visited. It orbited a dying star at the very edge of Concord space, far from any trade routes or important worlds. No one came here except those who had business with the human ambassador. There were no guards, no security checkpoints, no weapons scans. Keth Varan docked his small ship and walked through empty corridors until he reached a simple door with a simple sign. Ambassador C. Vance, please knock. He knocked. Come in, said a warm voice. The room behind the door was nothing like what Keth Varan had expected. He had imagined something alien, something strange and frightening. Instead, he found a comfortable space filled with soft chairs, colorful fabrics, and the smell of something pleasant he could not identify. Plants grew in pots near the windows, soft music played from somewhere he could not see, and in the center of the room, a human woman was pouring hot liquid into small cups. She was small. Smaller than Kethvaran, certainly. Her hair was gray, and her face had lines that suggested age, but her eyes were bright and young. She wore simple clothing. She smiled when she saw him. "You must be the cartographer everyone is talking about," she said. "Please, sit down. I made tea." Kethvaran sat. He did not know what tea was, but he accepted the cup she offered. The liquid was warm and smelled like plants. He did not drink it. "You are not what I expected," he said. "No one ever is," Ambassador Vance replied. She sat across from him and sipped her own tea. "What were you expecting? Something with tentacles? Glowing eyes? A being of pure energy? I do not know. Something more powerful." Vance laughed. It was a gentle sound, not mocking. "I am not powerful. I am just a diplomat. I sit here and answer questions when people are brave enough to ask them. Most are not. I have questions. I know. You want to know why the maps stop at our border. You want to know what happened to the Concord fleets. You want to know what we are." She set down her cup. "I will tell you what I can. Some things I cannot explain because I do not fully understand them myself. Some things I will not explain because you are not ready to hear them. But I will be honest with you. Kethvaran of the Scythians. You deserve that much for coming so far." Kethvaran leaned forward. "The fleets. What happened to them? They came to conquer us. We were young then. We had barely reached our own moon. We had no weapons that could threaten even one of your ships, let alone thousands." Vance's eyes grew sad. "We did not want to fight. We did not even know how to fight against such power. So we did the only thing we could do. We wished very hard for them to go away." "Wished? That is the simplest way to explain it. Human consciousness works differently than yours, cartographer. When enough of us believe something strongly enough, the universe listens. When 8 billion humans looked at the sky and thought the same thought, we will not be taken. Reality itself responded." Kethvaran shook his head. "That is not possible. Thoughts cannot change reality. Beliefs cannot move ships or bend time. Cannot they?" Vance smiled gently. "Your species has perfect memory. The Moravians live for hundreds of thousands of years. The crystalline singers communicate through vibrations that can shatter mountains. Every species in the galaxy has something unique about their minds. Humans are no different. We just have a different gift. Gift? Or curse? We are not sure which." Vance stood and walked to the window. Outside, the dying star cast red light across her face. When humans believe something, truly believe it, with every part of ourselves, that belief has weight. It has substance. It presses against reality and shapes it. One human believing alone cannot do much. But billions? Billions thinking the same thought, feeling the same feeling, wanting the same thing. She turned back to him. "That is a force that even physics cannot ignore." Kethvaran felt his understanding of the universe cracking. Everything he knew, everything he had been taught about how reality worked, was breaking apart. "The fleets," he said slowly. "They experienced human belief. They experienced human refusal. 8 billion minds said no, at exactly the same moment. The universe heard. Space and time in our system became unstable. Not because we attacked, but because reality itself could not hold its shape under the weight of so much unified thought. The survivors spoke of seeing impossible things, stars moving, time changing. Yes, our belief was not controlled back then. It was raw, desperate, terrified. It lashed out in ways we did not intend. We did not mean to hurt anyone. We only wanted to survive." Vance's voice was heavy with old grief. "But we did hurt them. We drove them mad with visions they could not understand. We aged them by decades and moments. We showed them things that human minds can process but others cannot. Why did you not explain this to the Concord? Why did you allow them to forget? Because they wanted to forget. Because the truth was too frightening. Because we were also afraid not of them, but of ourselves." Vance sat back down, suddenly looking very tired. "We discovered something terrible that day, Kethvaran. We discovered that if humans wanted something badly enough, we could break the laws of the universe to get it. We could reshape reality. We could unmake things that existed and create things that did not. She met his 6 eyes with her too. We stayed behind the boundary because we needed to learn control. We needed to understand what we were before we could safely exist alongside others. The silence was not punishment. It was quarantine. We were not hiding from the galaxy. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We were protecting the galaxy from us. Keth Varan sat with this knowledge for a long moment. His tea had grown cold. His thoughts were spinning. 900 years. He finally said, "You have been here for 900 years. You have not aged. Is that also belief? Humans who truly accept that death is optional sometimes find that it becomes optional." Vance smiled sadly. It is not a gift everyone wants. Living forever means watching everyone you love grow old and die. It means carrying memories that grow heavier with each century. I stay here because someone must. I stay here because I remember why the boundary exists. And I will not let anyone forget again. Keth Varan rose to leave. But at the door, he stopped. What would happen if humans wanted something truly terrible? If billions of you believed in something destructive? Vance did not answer for a long time. That is why we stay inside the boundary, she finally said. That is why we teach our children to be careful with their thoughts. That is why we have spent 3,000 years learning discipline. She looked at him, and for the first time, Keth Varan saw something ancient and frightening behind her kind eyes. Humans can be wonderful. Cartographer. Our dreams can build paradise. But our nightmares. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Keth Varan told himself he would not do it. He told himself he would return to the archive, file his findings, and accept that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. He told himself this for 3 days as his ship drifted near the Terran boundary. On the 4th day, he crossed. There was no physical barrier, no wall or checkpoint or warning signal. The boundary existed only on maps and in the minds of those who knew to fear it. Keth Varan simply pointed his ship toward the darkness beyond and flew. At first, nothing happened. Space looked the same. Stars burned in the distance. His instruments showed normal readings. Perhaps, he thought, the stories were exaggerated. Perhaps human space was just another region of the galaxy, no different from any other. Then his navigation system screamed. Stars were appearing on his sensors. Not distant stars, close ones. Stars that had not been there a moment before. His map, supposedly complete, showed nothing, but his eyes showed him suns burning in colors he had never seen. Purple, gold, a deep crimson that hurt to look at directly. His ship shuddered. The instruments went crazy. Numbers spun without meaning. Directions changed without warning. Keth Varan gripped his seat and watched the universe transform around him. A planet materialized off his port side. It was blue and green, like countless habitable worlds, but it had rings made of light instead of rock. The light pulsed in patterns that almost looked like language. A moon orbited the planet, no. 3 moons, no. 7. The number kept changing every time he blinked. Keth Varan understood now why the maps were empty. Human space could not be mapped. It did not follow stable rules. The humans had been dreaming their corner of the galaxy into new shapes for 3,000 years, and reality had bent to accommodate their visions. He passed a nebula that should have taken centuries to form. It was shaped like a creature from human mythology. His translator supplied the word dragon, though he did not fully understand it. The nebula had eyes made of newborn stars. They seemed to follow his ship as he flew past. An asteroid belt spelled words in a human language. His translator struggled, then provided, "Welcome, traveler. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." As if that were possible, Keth Varan flew deeper. He passed a gas giant that his sensors insisted was alive. It had thoughts. It had feelings. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had given consciousness to a planet. He heard its voice in his mind, vast and slow and curious. "Little visitor," the planet mind said. "You are the first in so long. Are you afraid?" "Yes," Keth Varan admitted. "Good. Fear keeps small things safe. But you came anyway. That is interesting." The voice faded. The gas giant drifted behind him. Keth Varan flew on. Finally, he encountered a ship. It was enormous, miles long, at least possibly longer. His instruments could not measure it properly. The ship was built in a style that made no engineering sense. Towers rose from its surface, gardens grew in open spaces, exposed to vacuum. Lights blazed in patterns that seemed decorative rather than functional. A signal reached his communication system. A human voice, warm and friendly. "Hello, little cartographer. We've been watching your journey. Would you like to come aboard?" Kethvaran found himself unable to speak. He simply transmitted an agreement signal and let the massive ship draw his vessel into a docking bay. When he emerged, humans were waiting for him. They looked so ordinary. Soft skin, 2 eyes, bipedal stance. Nothing about their appearance suggested the impossible power they contained. They smiled at him. Some waved. A few children, small humans, Kethvaran realized, watched him with open curiosity. One human stepped forward. He was tall, with dark skin and gray hair. His smile was genuine and warm. "Welcome to the dreaming ship," he said. "My name is David. We've been expecting you for quite some time." "Expecting me?" Kethvaran's voice sounded strange in the vast docking bay. "How could you know I was coming?" "We knew someone would come eventually. Someone curious enough to look past the silence. Someone brave enough to cross the line." David gestured for Kethvaran to follow. "The Concord forgot us because they chose fear. You came because you chose wonder. That makes you special." They walked through the ship. Kethvaran saw things that should not exist. Gardens that grew in sunlight from nowhere. Rooms that were larger on the inside than the outside. A library that seemed to contain more books than could possibly fit in the galaxy. "This is impossible," he said softly. "No," David replied. "Just improbable. And humans have never let probability stop us." They reached an observation deck. Through windows that stretched impossibly wide, Kethvaran could see human space spread out before him. Stars that sang, planets that dreamed, structures of light and thought that defied any description he knew. "What are you building here?" he asked. "What is all this?" David stood beside him, looking out at the impossible vista. "We are practicing," he said. "When we first discovered what we could do, we were terrified. Our belief had destroyed minds and broken physics without any intention. We needed to learn control. We needed to understand the limits, if there were any limits, of what human consciousness could achieve. And now we are getting better. We can shape reality deliberately. We can create instead of just destroy. We can imagine things into existence and keep them stable." David turned to face Kethvaran. "But we still stay inside the boundary. We still keep ourselves separate, because we are not ready for the galaxy, and the galaxy is not ready for us. When will you be ready?" David's expression grew serious. "There is something coming, cartographer. We do not know exactly what it is or when it will arrive, but we have seen hints of it in our dreams. A darkness from beyond the galaxy, something old and hungry and vast, something that cannot be fought with ships or weapons." Kethvaran felt cold spread through his body. "What do you mean?" "The Concord thinks it rules this galaxy. But this galaxy is just a small island in an infinite ocean. There are things out there that make the Concord look like insects. Things that have destroyed countless civilizations across countless galaxies. One day, those things will notice us." David looked back out at the transformed space around them. "When that day comes, the galaxy will need something more than armies. It will need beings who can reshape reality itself. It will need minds that can imagine new laws of physics. It will need dreamers who can believe a threat out of existence." He smiled, but there was no joy in it. "We are becoming the immune system of the universe, Kethvaran. The antibodies that will fight what cannot otherwise be fought. We stay in our space not because we are prisoners, but because we are preparing. We are making ourselves into a weapon that can never be turned off." Kethvaran stared at the impossible stars. "Does the galaxy know this? Does anyone understand what you are doing? You know now. You are the first outsider to truly understand in 3,000 years." David put a hand on Kethvaran's shoulder. "The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" Kethvaran spent 6 months in human space. He walked through gardens that grew on the surface of stars. He spoke with humans who remembered the first day their species reached for the sky. He watched children learn to shape small pieces of reality with their thoughts, creating flowers from nothing, making light dance in their hands. The humans gave him a gift before he left. A map. The first complete map of human space ever created. It was stored in a crystal that changed color depending on how you looked at it, and the map inside it shifted constantly, updating itself as human dreams reshaped the territory it described. "Share it if you think it's right," David told him at the docking bay. "Or keep it secret if you think the galaxy isn't ready. We leave that choice to you." The journey back to Concord space felt longer than it should have. Kethvaran's ship seemed to move through water instead of vacuum. Perhaps reality was reluctant to let him go. Perhaps the universe itself was curious what he would do next. He arrived at Station Varanthos on a quiet day. The great archive was nearly empty. Most scholars were at a conference on another world. Kethvaran walked through halls he had walked for 40 years, but they felt different now. Smaller, limited. Director Thesson found him in his old workspace. "You crossed the boundary," she said. It was not a question. Her enormous eyes showed no surprise, only deep concern. "You went into human space?" "Yes." "You survived?" "Yes." Kethvaran set the crystal map on his desk. Light danced inside it, colors shifting like dreams. "I brought something back." Thesson stared at the crystal for a long moment. Her 7 hearts beat slowly in her massive chest. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "What do you intend to do with it?" Kethvaran had asked himself this question every day for 6 months. He had considered keeping the secret, as generations before him had done. He had considered destroying the crystal and pretending none of it had ever happened. The galaxy had survived for 3,000 years without knowing the truth about humanity. Perhaps ignorance was safer. Perhaps forgetting was wise. But he remembered the darkness David had spoken of. Something coming from beyond the galaxy. Something that could not be fought with normal weapons. If that threat was real, the Concord needed to know. They needed to understand that they were not alone in their corner of the universe, that guardians watched over them, preparing for a war no one else knew was coming. "I am going to call a gathering," Kethvaran said. "I am going to show them everything." Thesson closed her eyes. "The council will not believe you. Some will. That is enough." The gathering was held 3 weeks later. Representatives from every major species in the Concord attended. They filled a vast amphitheater, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, all waiting to hear what a simple cartographer had to say. Kethvaran stood at the center of the chamber. His 6 eyes moved across the crowd. Silthians and Moravians, crystalline singers and void swimmers. Beings of every shape and color the galaxy had produced. All of them had been taught to ignore the silence at the edge of their maps. All of them had been trained to never ask questions about human space. He activated the crystal. The map spread across the chamber, filling the air with images of impossible beauty. Stars that sang, planets that dreamed, nebulae shaped like creatures from human mythology, space that bent and folded in ways that physics said were impossible. Gasps rose from the crowd. Some beings wept, others trembled. A few covered their eyes, unable to process what they were seeing. Kethvaran told them everything. He told them about the fleets that had tried to conquer humanity, and the strange power that had destroyed them without a single weapon being fired. He told them about the eldest's memories and Ambassador Vance's explanation. He told them about the dreaming ship and the humans who were learning to reshape reality with their thoughts. And he told them about the darkness, the thing coming from beyond the galaxy, the threat that would one day require weapons no ordinary species could imagine. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Then chaos erupted. Representatives shouted questions. Some demanded proof. Others called for immediate action. Though what action, they could not say. A few species representatives simply left, too overwhelmed to continue. But some listened. Some understood. The eldest herself appeared via hologram, her ancient form shimmering in the chamber's light. "The cartographer speaks truth," she said, and her voice silenced the crowd. "I have carried these memories for 900,000 years. I have watched the Concord forget, and I have let it happen because fear is sometimes easier than knowledge. But the time for forgetting has ended." A new signal entered the chamber. A holographic image appeared beside the eldest, Ambassador Catherine Vance. She looked the same as when Kethvaran had met her, small, gray-haired, with eyes that held centuries of memory. She smiled at the crowd. That warm smile that had greeted Kethvaran with tea and patience. "You have spent 3,000 years afraid of us," she said. "That was wise. We were afraid of ourselves too. We did not understand what we were, or what we could become. We isolated ourselves because we needed to learn control before we could safely exist alongside others." She looked across the gathered representatives, her 2 human eyes meeting thousands of alien gazes. "But we have learned. We have grown. We have spent 3 millennia practicing how to shape reality without breaking it. We are not perfect, We may never be perfect, but we are ready to take the next step. Vance's expression grew serious. The boundary remains. We will not overwhelm your space with our dreams, but it is no longer a wall. Consider it a door. Her smile returned, gentle and kind. It has always been unlocked. You only needed to knock. The gathering dissolved into endless discussions. Keth Varan slipped away, while others debated. He returned to his workspace and sat alone with the crystal map, watching its colors shift and flow. He had done what he set out to do. He had filled in the blank space on the galaxy's maps. He had brought light to the darkness that had haunted his people for millennia. But he understood now that maps were never complete. There would always be unknown spaces. There would always be mysteries waiting beyond the next star. The galaxy was vast and strange and full of wonders that no cartographer could ever fully record. That was what made it beautiful. Months later, Keth Varan received a message. The Concord Council had voted to send a formal diplomatic mission to human space. For the first time in 3,000 years, non-humans would cross the Terran boundary as guests rather than invaders. The Council wanted Keth Varan to lead the mission. He accepted. As his ship approached the boundary, Keth Varan looked at the official galactic map displayed on his screen. The blank space was no longer blank. Human space was marked now. Its borders defined, its existence acknowledged, but he knew the map was still incomplete. The humans had shown him wonders that no chart could capture. Dreams made real. Thoughts given weight. A species that had learned to bend the universe with belief. The boundary line passed beneath his ship. Reality shivered. Stars began to change color, and Keth Varan flew forward into the impossible, carrying the galaxy's hope toward beings who had learned to dream the future into existence. The map had an ending once, but endings, he had learned, were just invitations to explore further. The galaxy was waking up to its guardians, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the thing that was coming drew slightly closer. But for the first time in 3,000 years, someone was preparing to meet it.